This chapter we're going to take a look at functions, and a lot of times they'll ask you to list a function's domain or range, and it's not too bad to figure out. Now, look, a function, if you looked for a definition, we could use this. It's just a rule that defines each input as having one output. And you can graph functions the same way that we have in the past for linear equations. So here's a graph, here's a straight line, and if you look right here, this coordinate right here is 0, 2. So I could put that into a table. The x value is 0 and the y value is 2 for this point right here. And let's see, let me go get a green point right here. See this point on the line? It's at 2 on the x-axis, but it's at 4 on the y-axis. So that point that's in green, its coordinates are 2, 4. And that's kind of nice to know. Now, the last chapter we said that if we have 2 points of a line, we could figure out its slope. And sure enough, the slope would be positive 1, same way that we've always done it. And if we plugged it into the point slope formula, we could go get the slope-intercept form, and we'd find out, hey, the equation for this line is y equals 1x plus 2. And this is kind of neat when we take a look at this information from what we've done in the past to what we can do with it now. And we're going to take a look at this idea of inputs and outputs and how that fits into an idea of what a function is. Well, before we go further, let's take a look at this. X has different nicknames. If I looked at the X, it could be the same thing as domain. Let's get a new page here real quick, and let me just kind of explain it like this. My name is David, okay? But my brother, he has always called me Dave my whole life. It's never been David, it's Dave, one syllable. And at the same time, um, you know, a lot of my other friends call me by my last name, Tate. Now, I will answer to all three of these names, okay? But they're all referring to me. In the same way, when I take a look at X, right? And I'm talking about in the terms of like this graph, like here's X, here's all our values for X on this table, or this point right here has a point of 0, 2, and the 0 is your X value. That's great, but it's got another name. It can be called domain, and that just means all your X values. And then there's another nickname, input, and that's referring to your X values. So that makes it pretty easy um, to understand that when you see domain, just think of it as X. When you see input, think of it as X. Same thing's happening for Y, okay? Another name for the Y values would be the range. What's the range? Well, you list its Y values. And then the last one is output. And we will talk about what's happening there. So this little note down here, when you see X, it's the same thing as domain. And when you see X, it's also the same thing as input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it over this table right here, just that way I can help you remember that, hey, if you see it listed as domain, it's the same thing as X. If you see input, it's the same thing as X. The output refers to your Y's, and the range refers to your Y's also. It just kind of depends which nickname that you want to go with. Now, why do we use this thing called input? A function is just a rule that defines each input as having one output. Well, if I take this input, which means X, or domain, this 0, and I plug it into this equation, 0 times X is 0, and then 0 plus 2 is 2, so Y equals 2, and that makes this the output. I put my X's in, and I got a Y. I put in an input, and I got my output. And what it's talking about with this function rule is if I choose to put in another 0 and stick it into this equation, I will get one output. It'll get the same answer again. If I put in 0, it's going to get a 2 again. And that's what it's talking about with the function rule. It's basically using the equation to stick in an X value to get a Y value, to stick in an input to get a output. Watch what happens with the 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So my input is 2 and my output is 4. Or my domain is 2 and my output, I'm sorry, my domain is 2 and my range is 4. So these are just nicknames. Now, there are different types of questions that they're going to give us. One of the important things that we need to go over is they will throw out this term relation a lot. And you know what it is? It's a set of ordered pairs. See here, we've got 3 ordered pairs. We've got 8, 14, because this 8 is bound together with the 14. We've got this 10, 18 right here, because they're bound together as an ordered pair, and 40, 78. So they gave it to us in the form of a table. They could give it to us as a bunch of ordered pairs, but a relation is just a set of ordered pairs. It's just a bunch of dots on a coordinate plane. Now, the question, though, here is list the domain and range of the above relationship, of the relationship above. So what's my domain? Well, this is x, and so it's 8, 10, 40. What's my range? Well, that's your y, so it's 14, 18, 78. That's all we do. Other times, they're going to say use the equation rule to finish the function table. Now, we talked about how we got this equation rule. Right here, you'd have to go get the slope and then plug it into the point slope formula. A lot of times, they will give you the equation, and they're going to call it a rule. It's like a function rule. And they will say, here's the domain, go find the rest of the table. Or they'll say, get the range, which is the same as y. So if my x's are 0, I plug in 0 right here. 0 times negative 2 is 0, and 0 plus 4 is 4. So y equals 4. Then you come down to the next x value, the next input, and you say, okay, let's go through and plug this in. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, and negative 4 plus 4 is 0. And you just go straight on along and finish what you need to finish. Now, sometimes they're not going to give you that information. They'll give you a blank table, and they'll say, here's our domain. Well, remember, domain is the same thing as x. So these are my x values. And that's the reason you could come straight in and put in your x values. And then it's very simple. It's the same thing we've done before. You have to go and insert these x values into your equation and go get your y values, which would be the same thing as range if they said that. So they can play tricks with you with these names, but you have to remember the different nicknames, and then you're okay. So that's what they're asking you to do when they give you a table and an equation. Type 3. Last one of the video. Here we go. List the domain and range of this function. So they give you a graph. You see these 3 red dots right here? No problem. What's the domain? Well, before you go further, how about we just go and get the coordinates of each dot? Let's see, this is negative 1, 2. This one's at 1, 3. And this one is at 3, 1. So go find the domain and range. Well, domain, they normally won't tell you is the x, but I'm putting that there for your notes. That way you know, hey, go get your x values. Well, if I've only got 3 points on here, I just have to go say, well, I've got a x value of negative 1, x value of positive 1, and x value of 3. And what you do is you go and you list your x values in order from least to greatest. And then you just end it with the bracket right there on the end. The range, well, it's the same thing, least to greatest. You don't have to worry about matching them up. Let's see, this is a 2, a 3, and a 1. Well, 1's my smallest, then the 2, and then the 3. And there you have it. You know how to do 3 types of problems that involve the domain and range of a function. And a function is really just an equation or a rule, and it tells you what to do with your x's to get a y. So good luck, and we'll see how you do on the next lesson.